Hey guys, Nose with Sneakers here. So pretty much today's video is going to be just about me explaining the attachments in Battlefield 4 and getting into depth about them, which one should I use, what do they all do, etc. So most of my other tutorials have just been pretty much me live explaining things, like doing the tutorial live on stream. And I wanted to try a different style of video today where I'm more just sort of talking over what to do and explaining a little bit in game. So hope you enjoy the video, and if you have any feedback about, the stream or the content that I'm providing on YouTube, please let me know in the comments. Just don't be too mean to me because
He did the long reload, dude! He did the long reload!
So before I begin explaining the attachments and all their little features and what they do, I feel like I first need to go over the actual mechanics of the guns and how they work. I think having a better understanding over the gun mechanics will make it easier for you to decide what attachments to use. So pretty much the two prime mechanics that you need to worry about are recoil and spread. And there are some things in both of them that you need to take good account for when making attachment selections. So to explain recoil as straightforward as possible, it's basically the sheer force or magnitude of a weapon that, moves your gun. But in game terms, it's sort of just the camera that moves a certain amount per frame or fire or shot that's fired, and it's tied to the center of the screen. So in this case, in Battlefield 4, on every gun they generally have a very predictable recoil pattern. It's very similar. There may be slight deviations, but they're usually pretty straightforward. They either go, up, down, or up, left, up, right. They all have a very similar pattern, and each of them are all different. But ideally, the way you counter that is just by dragging down the direction that the path is giving you when you're not controlling your recoil. And another mechanic to keep in mind about recoil that not many people are familiar with is on the guns in Battlefield 4, there's actually a first shot recoil multiplier. So what that means is the first bullet on every gun has substantially more recoil than the rest. This is different for every gun. On every gun, like some guns may not have that much first shot recoil. If you test this, for example, on the AEK or the SCAR, it's pretty noticeable. So the very first bullet has more recoil than the rest. And this will be very important explaining in the attachments as we go on. Something else to keep in mind about the first shot recoil actually is, and I had tested this, and it definitely is true. So on burst weapons, so maybe like the M16, or if you set the AN94 to burst mode, etc., the first shot recoil is actually not applied to the first shot, it's applied to the last one. So if you fire a burst of 3 with the M16, the last shot has that extra recoil, not the first one, which I found pretty interesting, but I'll go over that later with the attachments and explaining them in more detail. So the second most important mechanic to be aware of in this game is spread. Now, to explain this as simple as possible, I did explain this in my infantry tutorial, but just to explain it again here in more detail. So pretty much, when you fire a gun, in your crosshairs on point, the longer you fire a gun, you have to imagine that there's a circle in the center, and that circle grows larger the longer you fire the gun. And as that circle grows, bullets will randomly be all around the circle inside. So pretty much, it's just random bullet deviation that goes everywhere the longer you fire a weapon. And most of the time, the way you counteract this is by simply burst firing. So stop shooting, start shooting again really quickly. Now, two mechanics that they added in this game that a lot of people may not be familiar with is, so there's spread increase and spread decrease. Spread increase is how much the spread increases per shot fired. Spread decrease is how long it takes for the circle to return back to its smallest state. So, in this game, you may think that burst firing actually resets your spread. Well, it does, but it actually doesn't reset it fully. It depends on how quickly you burst fire. So, say for example, you burst fired like as absolute fast as possible. The spread actually doesn't have enough time to reset. There's actually a bit of a delay where it resets, and I'll explain this further when I get to the attachments part. But it's quite interesting how they set that up. So pretty much, spread increase and spread decrease do play a role overall in your spread, and burst firing and at the way you burst fire and how fast you burst fire actually affects that as well. So we'll be going over that too. So starting off with all the suppressor types. So first of all, it silences your weapon, makes it less noisy. You don't show up on the minimap. It reduces your bullet's velocity, so pretty much the further away you are from a target, the longer it will take for the bullet to travel and hit the target. This is not really noticeable at close range, but as you go further range, it becomes a little bit more noticeable, and the bullet has more drop. And lastly, it gives about 20% more spread while you're hip firing when you're not moving. So now moving on to flash hider. it pretty much does exactly what it says it does. It will reduce the muzzle flash of a gun that's being fired from your perspective or from the enemy's perspective, and it will make your spread decrease slightly slower as a negative to the flash hider. So before I move on to the next attachment, I just want to give you guys a heads up that you will be seeing spread decrease on a couple of different attachments as I go along. And so pretty much what I've done with this is I've tested it a bunch of times on many different weapons for a while. So I tested it on the AEK, the M16, the FAMAS. And what I found was that, and this is with, I did two comparisons, one with maximum spread decrease you can possibly have and one with none. And the difference is so small, it's not worth worrying about it. It is only really a big difference depending on the range that you're firing from. So if you're really far away, and how quickly you're burst firing. If you burst fire slowly, because the further away you are, you want to burst fire slower anyway to have more control over your weapon. So ideally, you'll be seeing this a lot throughout the attachments, but I don't want you to worry about it. Pretty much the benefits you'll be getting from the attachments will be outweighing spread decrease. So now moving back onto the attachments, we're going to begin with the heavy barrel. So it has 50% less minimum starting spread, pretty much meaning your first set of shots will have far less spread, meaning your first set of shots will be far more accurate. It also has 7.5% less spread increase, so overall the gun will have less spread because it will build up spread slower. And it has 16.7% less movement spread. So in Battlefield 4 by default when you move there's a bit of a spread penalty, and this will reduce that spread penalty. And for the price of this attachment you'll have 30% more vertical recoil. The compensator will give you 25% less horizontal recoil, which is very good on certain weapons, but at the cost of 30% more spread increase per shot, which is huge. Like, I mean, if you think about it, 30% more spread per shot, so the circle will grow way faster. So I'm going to go over detail over this attachment and more in the end. I'm just giving you a quick rundown of them now, but yes, that's definitely something to watch out for. Muzzle brake pretty much does the exact same thing as compensator. The only difference is that it reduces your vertical recoil, but the overall magnitude of this attachment is just half of what the compensator is. But just replace horizontal recoil for vertical, and it's the exact same thing. So now for all the laser sights, it will give you 33% less minimum hip firing spread. At the cost of that, the laser is very visible, so people can see it if you turn a corner. They can see if you're hiding behind a corner or waiting for someone, and it's also very visible through smoke. So this is the downside of the laser. Now for the angled and folding grip. It will give you 20% less first shot recoil. So pretty much what I explained earlier about the first shot recoil multiplier that's added to every gun, this will reduce that by 20%. And it will also give you 34% slower spread decrease. The ergo and vertical grip will give you 50% less minimum spread while you're moving. Both, if you're either hip firing or ADSing, it doesn't matter, it will have the same effect. And it will also give you 34% slower spread decrease. Moving on to the second last attachment, the potato or stubby grip. It gives 20% less spread increase per shot. This stat alone easily makes this attachment to be one of the best in the game. I mean, in conjunction with its second benefit being that it gives less ADS max spread as well, and I don't think I have to say the negative about this attachment again. And ladies and gentlemen, for the final attachment in Battlefield 4 that I'll be talking about in this video will be the bipod. And pretty much, look, I'm really not going to go into much detail about this one. It gives a lot of benefits at the cost of the fact that you can't move. It only works when it's deployed. So it affects LMGs and other guns a little bit differently. Like the stats between different classes are a little bit different, but pretty much in a nutshell, okay, it pretty much gets rid of nearly all your spread and all your recoil at the cost of that you cannot move. You have to be deployed, and it, affects your range of motion. There's only a certain range of motion you have on the bipod. Alright, so I've explained to you the gun mechanics, I've explained to you what each attachment does. So now you're probably wondering, alright, so what attachments do I use then, Reaps? Okay. This is the part where it gets a little bit tricky, because every gun is very different, and they all do better with certain attachment setups, but it also depends on your playstyle and the way you want to play. So I'm going to go through a couple of guns now, and I'm going to give examples of how I pick the attachments, the way I like them, and the way I want to play them, and just an idea on a good way to decide and how to pick and how to select the best attachments, the most optimal attachments for your gun and your playstyle. So for me, I use the heavy barrel and stubby grip for the LED5. Why? This gun for me pretty much has barely any recoil whatsoever. I don't need to give anything to help its recoil, so I just do whatever I can to make it as accurate as possible by reducing as much spread as possible, as it doesn't really have any recoil for me to begin with. So heavy barrel and stubby are the perfect combination for me and my playstyle for this weapon. For the Scar H, I like to use a bit of a different setup, I like to use the heavy barrel and angled grip. Why not stubby and heavy barrel? Because this gun has a lot more first shot recoil than the L85, and I feel like this complements this setup and makes it more consistent for bursting over using stubby. So I feel more accurate using angled grip and heavy barrel over stubby and heavy barrel because it just feels, I feel like it's got way too much first shot recoil to have consistent bursting. That's why I use this setup. And now for the most favorited and hated gun, the AEK. So why do I just use stubby grip on this one? This gun, I don't like using heavy barrel on this weapon because this gun already has way too much vertical recoil and horizontal recoil, so I feel like this just makes the gun worse. Yes, it might reduce the spread, but for burst firing, it makes it way more inconsistent. And I don't use compensator either, or muzzle brake, because this gun already has way too much spread. And doing this, yes, it will help your recoil, but it will just make the spread that the AEK already has 10 times worse. So I personally don't like using any barrel for the AEK. And why do I just use stubby here and not something like the angled grip? Well, the angled grip does help with its first shot recoil and makes bursting more consistent. But like I said, this gun has a ridiculous amount of spread, and stubby grip really helps deal with that. So, overpicking what I think would be better for the AEK, stubby grip. And that's why I use for the AEK just the stubby grip. For the FAMAS, I like to use the compensator and stubby grip. Now, this is one of these rare guns where I will use a compensator, and there's a reason for this. This gun, the FAMAS, has ridiculous recoil. Its rate of fire is insane, and its recoil is massive. It's got a lot of horizontal, vertical recoil, you name it. Now, I use the compensator on this weapon. The only time where I would ever really use a compensator or muzzle brake on a weapon is when the recoil itself is greater than the spread. It's actually more devastating than the spread. So, the FAMAS does have a lot of spread, but its recoil is a lot more detrimental than its spread in this situation. So in this scenario, I reckon compensator is viable for the FAMAS, but only if you burst fire it 2 to 3 shots at a time. If you're spraying it, it's going to not help, because it's just going to give you way more spread and completely eliminate and make the compensator counterproductive. The stubby I use on this weapon because I don't feel like this gun has much first shot recoil, and I feel like its spread is far more valuable than giving it something like an ergo grip. So, stubby and compensator, great choices for this weapon. Compensator is a very, and muzzle brake, you got to be careful with these two attachments because the spread penalty that this gives you can be very bad. And like you're probably thinking, well, why not just burst fire a lot to keep resetting the spread? That's true, but if you're burst firing 2 to 3 shots at a time at all ranges, you're missing out on valuable damage that you could be doing if you were full autoing. I feel like, yeah, so the further away you are from a target, you want to burst more, but it still is a very fine line between when you should use compensator or muzzle brake. Like I said, though, this is very preference. You use what you want to use, use what works for you. But for me, that's why I use this setup for this gun. So I hope this video helped you out. I hope it helped give a good idea on how the guns work in the game and what attachments you should be using and so on. But if this video, if you really like this style of video, please let me know in the comments. And I know 2042 will be coming out really soon. You're probably wondering, what's the point in this video? Well, I wanted to do it because this is sort of, I guess, practice for me to help making video guides like this in the future. But if you did like this style of video, please let me know in the comments. And I just want to say a quick thank you to Synthic for all the, so much valuable information sources. Their website is amazing. They give so much detailed information, source information on the game. And I highly recommend checking it out if you guys want to get really technical with this, as this is where I got pretty much all of my information anyway. So, yeah, I just want to say thanks everyone for the support. It's been absolutely nuts, and I'll see you guys in the next one.